There are mysteries that fade with time, swallowed by history, and then there are those that refuse to die, cases so strange, so tangled, that they haunt anyone who dares to look too closely. This is one of those stories. Imagine a trail of evidence that points in every direction, yet leads to no one. Imagine witnesses who remember everything and nothing all at once. Imagine a case where every answer only cracks open 3 new questions. That's the kind of puzzle we're about to step into, the kind that defies logic, resists closure, and keeps investigators awake long after the world has stopped asking questions. This isn't just another unsolved crime. It's the most unsettling mystery no one can solve. And tonight, we're going to peel back its layers, one revelation at a time. Chapter 1: The Case That Defies Logic. Some mysteries are strange. Others are frustrating. But this one, it feels almost designed to resist being solved. From the very first day, nothing about it lined up the way it should have. The crime was discovered under circumstances that already seemed off. The location, so ordinary, so familiar, was the last place anyone expected to find something so sinister. And yet, there it was. A scene that screamed for answers but offered none. At first, investigators expected the usual routine. Secure the area, collect the evidence, follow the leads. But within hours, that sense of order disintegrated. Key pieces of evidence contradicted one another. Timelines bent under the weight of conflicting statements. The more people they interviewed, the less clear the story became. It was as if reality itself had been scrambled. Every clue suggested movement, motive, identity, and yet every clue also unraveled the moment it was examined too closely. Detectives weren't just chasing a suspect. They were chasing clarity. And for the family of the victim, that was the cruelest part. Not knowing who did it was devastating. But not knowing how or even what truly happened, that was unbearable. From the beginning, this wasn't just another unsolved case. It was a paradox, a riddle wrapped in tragedy. And it was only the beginning. Chapter 2: A Crime Without Clarity. The first hours after a crime are supposed to bring answers, patterns, direction. But here, every step forward seemed to make the ground less stable. The initial report came in like so many others, routine, almost ordinary. A disturbance. Call for help. By the time first responders arrived, though, the scene felt anything but ordinary. It was chaotic, eerily silent in some ways, yet full of contradictions. Objects were out of place, but not in ways that made sense. A window left open, though there were no signs of forced entry. A piece of furniture slightly shifted, yet untouched by fingerprints. Even the smallest details felt deliberate, as if someone had staged them to look suspicious. And then there were the witnesses. Some swore they heard something. A crash, a scream, footsteps. Others insisted the night was quiet, calm, almost unnervingly normal. The more statements were collected, the less cohesive the picture became. For investigators, it was like trying to assemble a jigsaw puzzle where half the pieces didn't belong to the same picture. They could feel the weight of something significant, but couldn't make it take shape. This wasn't just a crime. It was confusion, written into every inch of the scene. And as the first day closed, one unsettling realization emerged. Clarity wasn't coming. Chapter 3: Shadows at the Scene. When crime scene photos were first examined, nothing screamed breakthrough. No smoking gun, no obvious clue. But buried in the details were things that unsettled even the most seasoned investigators. For starters, there were shadows, literal ones. Surveillance cameras nearby caught brief flickers of movement in the hours leading up to the incident. Blurry shapes, distorted by poor lighting, slipping in and out of frame. Were they people, animals, or just tricks of the night? No one could say for sure, but their timing was suspicious, always just before or after the key window of the crime. Inside, the shadows took on a different meaning. Corners of the room seemed oddly arranged, as though someone had moved items deliberately. A lamp turned slightly away. A chair angled toward a door that no one remembered opening. Nothing conclusive, but everything just off. Investigators are trained to look for order in chaos, but here the chaos felt crafted. Like someone had gone out of their way to make sure no detail pointed cleanly in one direction. It left detectives staring at their own notes, asking themselves a haunting question. Were they documenting a crime scene or a stage? If it was the latter, then someone out there was playing a very dangerous game. Chapter 4: Witnesses who saw too much. In most cases, eyewitnesses are the light in the darkness, the people who can say, "I saw this. I heard that." But in this case, their words only clouded everything further. One neighbor swore they saw a figure leaving the scene. Tall, hurried, wearing something dark. But another insisted no one left at all, that the street was empty in those crucial minutes. A passerby described hearing a sharp noise, maybe a struggle, but someone else in the same building said the night was quiet, peaceful, almost unnervingly so. Then came the strangest testimony. A man claimed he saw two figures inside, silhouettes shifting against the curtains. But his account contradicted the timeline entirely, placing activity inside long after police believed the crime had already occurred. Were these lies, mistakes, or deliberate misdirection? Human memory is flawed, detectives knew that. But this wasn't just inconsistency, it was chaos. The more stories piled up, the less reliable any of them felt. Each one seemed to cancel the other out, leaving behind a void where the truth should have been. And that's when the investigators realized this wasn't going to be solved by relying on people. If answers were to come, they would have to come from the evidence itself. But even the evidence was about to betray them. Chapter 5: The First Suspect. Every mystery needs a first suspect, and in this case, suspicion landed quickly. He was someone close to the scene, someone who knew the routines, the details, the vulnerabilities. Police didn't say his name at first, only that he was a person of interest. But the whispers spread. Neighbors nodded knowingly, convinced the story fit. He had been seen nearby, pacing in the days before. He had a history, not violent but messy enough to raise eyebrows. Old disputes, strange late-night behavior. When the investigators knocked on his door, they weren't just curious. They were convinced. At first, he cracked under questioning. His alibi stumbled, his answers didn't line up. He admitted things he shouldn't have known, details never released. It seemed open and shut. But then, everything unraveled. Security footage placed him miles away at the crucial hour. Receipts, timestamps, phone data, one by one, the pieces proved his innocence. The details he knew were details anyone local could have guessed. His nervousness, the police realized, wasn't guilt. It was fear. And just like that, their strongest lead vanished. The man they thought had all but confessed walked free. The case didn't just reset, it grew darker. If not him, then who? And if someone else had done this, why was it so easy to pin the blame on the wrong person? Chapter 6: A Trail of Clues That Went Nowhere. With the first suspect cleared, investigators turned to the physical evidence. And at first glance, it looked promising. A shoe print in the dirt. A scrap of fabric snagged on a fence. A strange set of fingerprints on a doorframe that shouldn't have been touched. Each clue felt like a breadcrumb, leading somewhere. Detectives followed with quiet optimism. Finally, something concrete. But as the lab reports trickled in, that optimism collapsed. The shoe print? A common brand, impossible to narrow down. The fabric? Synthetic, mass-produced, the kind of material you'd find in thousands of jackets. The fingerprints? Belonging not to a stranger, but to a delivery worker who'd been there days earlier, completely unrelated. It was like the case was playing tricks on them, offering hope only to snatch it away. Even the smallest things refused to fit neatly together. Phone records showed late-night calls, but to numbers disconnected or untraceable. Security cameras pointed in the right direction, but were mysteriously offline at the worst possible moment. The deeper they dug, the more it seemed the trail wasn't leading them forward at all. It was looping back on itself, an endless circle. And that's when a chilling thought set in. Maybe this wasn't incompetence or coincidence. Maybe someone wanted the trail to go nowhere. Chapter 7: The Media Storm. The moment the story hit the evening news, everything changed. What had started as a quiet investigation suddenly became a headline war. Reporters camped outside police stations, cameras flashing every time a detective so much as stepped outside. The case was irresistible mystery, fear, unanswered questions. Networks gave it dramatic titles, podcasts dissected every rumor, and late-night talk shows turned it into a chilling punchline. Within days, it wasn't just a local crime, it was a national spectacle. The pressure mounted. Every press conference was a minefield. Detectives dodged aggressive questions, carefully choosing their words, while journalists spun even the smallest update into breaking news. A missing detail? Proof of incompetence. A vague statement? Evidence of a cover-up. And the public, well, they weren't just watching. They were theorizing. Social media lit up with wild speculation. Some pointed fingers at celebrities who lived nearby. Others accused the police of hiding the real suspect. Amateur sleuths launched forums dedicated to cracking the case, analyzing blurry photos and misinterpreted timelines as if they were gospel truth. But all this noise had a cost. Real leads drowned in a sea of conspiracy. Witnesses hesitated to speak, fearing their names would be dragged across headlines. And every theory, no matter how absurd, chipped away at the fragile foundation of truth. The case wasn't just a crime anymore. It was a circus. Chapter 8, False Confessions. When a case becomes this notorious, something strange always happens. People begin stepping forward to claim responsibility. And that's exactly what unfolded here. The first confession came from a drifter, a man with a long history of run-ins with the law. He gave details, yes, but they were details already plastered across the news. Investigators quickly realized he was parroting headlines, not revealing hidden truths. Then came another, and another. Before long, half a dozen people had confessed. Some were struggling with mental illness, others desperate for attention. A few even seemed to crave notoriety, as though attaching themselves to the mystery would make them part of history. The police were forced to spend valuable hours chasing these false leads, only to watch them crumble. Each dead end left investigators frustrated, and the public more confused. If so many people were stepping forward, did that mean the real perpetrator was hiding in plain sight? Or was the case warping reality so badly that people wanted to insert themselves into it? One detective later admitted, every false confession made the truth feel further away. It was like the case was eating itself. But buried among the noise, a chilling realization took hold. If so many lies could spread so easily, what chance did the truth really have of surviving? Chapter 9, The Vanishing Witness. For weeks, detectives had pinned their hopes on a single figure, a witness who claimed to have seen something critical on the night everything unraveled. This person wasn't just another passerby. They had details that didn't appear in the press, fragments only someone truly present could have known. At first, it seemed like a breakthrough. The witness described a shadowy figure near the scene, movements that didn't add up, a vehicle parked where none should have been. Investigators leaned in, believing they'd finally found a thread that could tie the chaos together. But just as quickly as they appeared, the witness vanished. No returned calls, no follow-up meetings. When detectives went to their home, it was empty. Clothes gone, furniture gone, as if the place had been abandoned overnight. Rumors swirled. Had the witness been silenced? Were they lying from the beginning? Or had they simply fled the unbearable weight of the spotlight, unwilling to have their life dissected by a relentless media storm? Whatever the reason, their disappearance left a void. The one person who might have been able to tip the balance between confusion and clarity had slipped away, leaving only more questions. And in a case already drowning in uncertainty, this wasn't just another setback. It was a haunting reminder of how fragile truth can be. Chapter 10, A Suspect Within the Ranks. When a case drags on with no answers, suspicion has a way of turning inward. And that's exactly what happened here. Whispers began circulating. Not about strangers lurking in the night, but about someone on the inside. A member of law enforcement. First, it sounded absurd. These were the very people tasked with finding the truth. But the longer the investigation stumbled, the louder the whispers grew. The theory wasn't without fuel. Reports leaked of evidence that had gone missing, crucial files that couldn't be found, and interviews that were mysteriously cut short. Some detectives insisted it was nothing more than sloppy record-keeping under immense pressure. Others weren't so sure. The public pounced on the idea. Headlines screamed of corruption. Forums lit up with theories of a cover-up. Even within the department, trust began to fracture. Could someone really be sabotaging the investigation from within? One chilling moment came when an officer, under quiet internal review, suddenly requested a transfer out of state. Officially, it was unrelated. Unofficially, it fueled speculation that perhaps they knew more than they let on. Nothing was ever proven, but the seed had been planted. For the first time, the line between hunter and hunted blurred. And if suspicion could fall on the very people sworn to protect justice, then who could anyone really trust? Chapter 11: Dead Ends Multiply. By this point, the investigation resembled less a straight path to justice and more a sprawling maze. Every promising lead seemed to twist into yet another dead end. One day, detectives chased a tip about a mysterious car scene circling the neighborhood. Hours of legwork revealed it belonged to a teenager sneaking out to see his girlfriend. Another day, they traced a phone call that seemed suspiciously timed, only to find it came from a misdialed number. Even forensic tests, the kind that usually offered certainty, returned with results that contradicted one another. It was maddening. Each false trail consumed precious time, drained resources, and tested the patience of everyone involved. The more dead ends appeared, the harder it became to tell the difference between coincidence and conspiracy. The media, of course, only amplified the chaos. Every abandoned lead was spun as evidence of incompetence. Why can't they solve this? Became the question echoed in living rooms across the country. But behind closed doors, detectives were asking themselves a darker question. Was this case unsolvable by design? It was as though someone or something was always 2 steps ahead, laying out a breadcrumb trail that led nowhere. And yet, the investigators couldn't walk away, because every dead end, no matter how frustrating, still carried the faint possibility that the next turn might finally break the cycle. Chapter 12: The Break-In That Changed Everything. Just when the case seemed destined to collapse under the weight of its own confusion, something happened that reignited hope. A break-in. It wasn't random. The target wasn't a wealthy home or a local business. It was the evidence storage facility tied to the case. Late one night, someone forced their way inside, bypassing alarms with uncanny precision. By the time security responded, the intruder was gone. What was missing sent shockwaves through the department. Not money, not weapons, but a single sealed box containing the most sensitive pieces of evidence from the investigation. Shoe prints, fabric samples, even photographs from the scene, all gone. To investigators, it felt like confirmation of their worst fears. Someone didn't just want this case to remain unsolved. They were actively working to bury it. The break-in shifted the tone entirely. No longer was this just a puzzle of scattered clues. It was now a battle against an unknown adversary. Was it someone inside the force? A suspect desperate to erase their tracks? Or a third party pulling strings for reasons no one could fully grasp? For the first time, detectives admitted out loud what many had quietly suspected. They weren't just chasing a mystery. They were up against someone who was chasing them. Chapter 13. A chilling pattern emerges. In the wake of the break-in, detectives began combing through old files, desperate to see what they might have missed. That's when one analyst noticed something unsettling. A similarity between this case and a handful of others scattered across the country. Different cities, different circumstances, but the patterns were there. Each case began with strange disappearances or unexplained events. Each was plagued by sudden media frenzy, false confessions, and evidence that seemed to evaporate before investigators could secure it. And in every instance, just when detectives thought they were close, something or someone swept the board clean. It was as though the case wasn't unique at all. It was part of a larger puzzle. The realization chilled everyone involved. Were they dealing with a single perpetrator who had perfected the art of creating chaos? Or was it something broader, an organized effort designed to ensure that some truths never saw daylight? Theories swirled. Some believed in a shadowy figure moving silently across state lines. Others whispered about powerful institutions pulling strings from the shadows. Whatever the explanation, the idea that this case wasn't isolated but connected to something bigger changed the game. This wasn't just about solving one crime anymore. It was about uncovering a pattern that seemed engineered to remain forever hidden. Chapter 14: Whispers of a Cover-Up. As the investigation dragged deeper into confusion, another theory began to gain traction, one that made people uneasy even to voice. What if this wasn't just a mystery? What if it was a cover-up? The whispers started small, passed between frustrated detectives in hushed tones. Evidence had disappeared not once, but multiple times. Witnesses had backed out under strange circumstances, and the break-in at the evidence storage facility felt far too precise to be random. Soon, journalists caught wind of the theory, and headlines exploded with accusations. Was law enforcement protecting someone? Was a powerful figure pulling strings from behind the scenes? To the public, it was easy to believe. After all, how else could so many mistakes line up so perfectly? Inside the department, morale cracked. Some officers swore the idea was nonsense, a desperate attempt to explain the inexplicable. Others weren't so sure. One investigator later admitted, "There were moments I thought we weren't allowed to solve this. But if there really was a cover-up, the obvious question remained, what was being hidden and why?" The possibility that the truth wasn't just elusive but deliberately buried added a haunting new dimension to the mystery. And for many, it changed the story forever. This wasn't simply a crime gone unsolved. It might have been a truth someone decided the world was never meant to know. Chapter 15: The Case Grows Cold. After months of relentless pursuit, the investigation began to lose its fire. Leads dried up. The media, once ferocious in its coverage, shifted focus to newer scandals and fresher tragedies. What had once dominated headlines now lingered only on the back pages, a fading echo of a story no one could truly explain. For the detectives still assigned to the case, it was soul-crushing. They had chased every angle, followed every thread, only to watch it unravel. The witness had vanished. The evidence had been stolen. The theories had spiraled into chaos. At some point, exhaustion replaced adrenaline. Files were boxed up, stored away in rooms that smelled of dust and neglect. The case was never officially closed. It remained stamped as unsolved. But in practice, it froze in time. New detectives cycled in, gave it a glance, and moved on. Old detectives retired, carrying the frustration with them like an invisible weight. For the families affected, the silence was worse than any bad news. At least an answer, even a terrible one, would have offered closure. Instead, they were left with questions that haunted every day. What happened? Who was responsible? Why had the truth slipped through everyone's fingers? The case hadn't been solved. It hadn't even been forgotten. It had simply grown cold. Chapter 16: Obsession Takes Hold. When a case goes cold, most people eventually move on. But not everyone. For some, the unanswered questions don't fade, they burn hotter. And that's exactly what began to happen here. A handful of detectives, journalists, and even ordinary citizens couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't finished. They pored over case files, dissected timelines, and hunted for inconsistencies. Nights blurred into mornings as they scoured forums, pieced together maps, and rewatched old interviews frame by frame. For these obsessives, the mystery became personal. One retired detective admitted, "I'd wake up at 3 in the morning thinking about it. I'd sit in the dark, replaying every detail in my head. It wasn't just a case anymore. It was part of me." Online, entire communities formed around the investigation. Thousands of people traded theories, some reasonable, others bordering on the fantastical. Every blurry photograph, every unexplained sound, every redacted document became fuel for endless speculation. But obsession has its cost. Friendships strained, careers stalled, and in some cases, families fractured under the weight of it. The search for answers gave meaning, but it also consumed. And yet, for all the sleepless nights and endless debates, the core truth remained maddeningly out of reach. The mystery didn't just refuse to die. It had dug its claws into those who chased it, ensuring they would never walk away unscarred. Chapter 17, Theories Run Wild. With no answers in sight, theories began to multiply like wildfire. Some were grounded in logic, built on fragments of evidence and careful deduction. Others stretched into the bizarre, the kind of ideas you'd expect to hear whispered in the dark corners of the internet. One camp believed the crime was the work of a lone, meticulous mastermind, a figure so skilled they could plant and erase clues at will. Another insisted it was bigger than any individual, a network, maybe even an institution, ensuring certain truths never came to light. Then came the more fantastical theories. Some claimed supernatural forces were at play, pointing to the eerie timing of events and the inexplicable failures of technology. Others spun stories of secret experiments, shadow governments, or ancient cults protecting hidden knowledge. The media latched on, of course. Each theory made for sensational headlines, pulling in viewers and sparking heated debates. But for investigators, the noise was suffocating. How could they separate fact from fiction when every possible explanation seemed to have an audience ready to believe it? Theories offered comfort to some, giving shape to the unexplainable. But to others, they were just another layer of fog, obscuring the truth. And as the speculation spiraled, one unsettling question grew louder. What if the wildest theories weren't so far from reality after all? Chapter 18, Technology Fails at Crucial Moments. If there's one thing investigators rely on in modern times, it's technology. Cameras, phones, GPS data, digital breadcrumbs that usually tell the story people won't. But in this case, technology seemed to betray them at every turn. Security cameras that should have captured the critical hours? Offline. Not destroyed, not tampered with, just conveniently malfunctioning. Cell towers that should have tracked movements? Logs missing or incomplete. Even audio recordings taken during interviews were corrupted, static swallowing key moments that might have revealed the truth. At first, these glitches were written off as coincidence. After all, systems fail. Machines break. But the pattern was impossible to ignore. Every time technology might have provided clarity, it failed in ways that felt almost deliberate. Detectives found themselves questioning the unthinkable. Were these failures the result of human tampering? Or something else entirely? For the public, it only fueled darker theories. How could everything go wrong at just the right moment? People asked. Was someone with access pulling wires behind the scenes, erasing evidence before it could surface? Or was the case itself cursed, doomed to remain a riddle no matter how advanced the tools became? In an age where technology usually brings answers, here it seemed to bring only silence. And silence, in this case, was more unsettling than any explanation. Chapter 19, Families Demand Answers. For investigators, the case was a puzzle. For the public, it was a spectacle. But for the families caught in the middle, it was agony. From the very beginning, they had been promised answers. Detectives assured them progress was being made, that justice was only a matter of time. But as months turned into years, those reassurances rang hollow. Every unanswered phone call, every press conference that offered nothing new, felt like another wound. Families began to speak out. They held vigils, pressed for updates, and demanded accountability. Standing in front of cameras, they asked the same question over and over. Why don't we know the truth? Their pain was raw, their frustration impossible to ignore. But their pleas didn't always bring comfort. Sometimes they fueled the circus. Headlines twisted their grief into spectacle, while online commentators dissected their every word and gesture, some even accusing them of knowing more than they admitted. Still, the families refused to let the mystery fade into silence. They became the heartbeat of the case, the force that kept it alive when everyone else seemed ready to walk away. Their persistence made one thing clear. While the public might grow bored, and investigators might burn out, for those who lost the most, this mystery wasn't entertainment. It was personal, and it would never stop hurting until the truth was finally uncovered. Chapter 20, Investigators Haunted by the Case. For detectives, some cases close neatly. Arrests are made, trials are held, and justice, at least in some form, is delivered. But this case refused to follow that path. And for the men and women who worked it, The lack of answers became a shadow they could never quite escape. Some admitted years later that the case kept them awake at night. They replayed interviews in their heads, wondering if they'd missed a subtle gesture or a throwaway comment. Others carried the guilt of evidence lost on their watch, or leads they hadn't pursued hard enough. One retired officer described it bluntly. It gets under your skin. You start thinking maybe it wasn't the case that failed. You did. The haunting wasn't just professional. It was personal. Birthdays, holidays, quiet dinners. At unexpected moments, the mystery would intrude. A memory would surface, a question unanswered, and suddenly the weight of it all came rushing back. Some investigators even stayed in touch with the families, years after being reassigned, because they couldn't bear to let go. Others avoided any mention of the case, treating it like a wound that never healed. In the end, the investigators were just as trapped as the families and the public. The mystery didn't just remain unsolved. It followed them, whispering in the background of their lives, a constant reminder of the truth that slipped away. Chapter 21. The Internet Won't Let It Die. While the official investigation stalled, the Internet picked up where the detectives left off, and it refused to let go. Forums, blogs, and later entire YouTube channels dedicated themselves to dissecting every detail. Amateur sleuths pored over police reports, redacted documents, and grainy photographs, treating each scrap like sacred text. Threads ran thousands of comments deep, debating timelines and motives with a fervor usually reserved for sports or politics. Some of it was thoughtful. Dedicated researchers uncovered overlooked inconsistencies, pointing out connections that had gone unnoticed. But much of it veered into the strange. Wild theories took root, blending fact with fiction until even seasoned followers couldn't tell where reality ended and speculation began. Social media made the case go viral again and again. Every anniversary, every small update, every supposed new clue sparked fresh waves of attention. Younger generations who weren't even alive when it first happened discovered it through TikTok breakdowns and long-form podcasts, keeping the mystery alive decades later. For better or worse, the Internet turned the case into something bigger than the files gathering dust in evidence rooms. It became a story owned by everyone, rewritten, reimagined, and endlessly debated. And while police may have grown tired of it, the digital world made one thing certain. This mystery would never truly die. Chapter 22. A break years too late. For years, silence hung over the case like a heavy fog. Then, out of nowhere, came a flicker of hope, a supposed breakthrough. It started with advances in forensic technology. Tests that hadn't even existed during the original investigation were now being applied to long-forgotten pieces of evidence. A partial print here, a faint trace of DNA there. Investigators whispered that something promising had finally surfaced. The news spread fast, igniting hope that the truth might finally be within reach. But the excitement was short-lived. The DNA was incomplete, degraded beyond usability. The print was too smudged to stand in court. Once again, the evidence pointed everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Worse still, years of bureaucratic mishandling meant that some crucial files had gone missing, either misplaced or destroyed in routine purges. It was as though time itself was conspiring against resolution. For the families, it was a gut punch. They had dared to imagine closure, only to find themselves back where they started, empty-handed and exhausted. For the public, it reinforced the sense that this mystery wasn't just unsolved. It was perhaps unsolvable. And yet, even in disappointment, the case burned brighter than before. Because if technology could bring us this close, what might the next breakthrough reveal? Chapter 23. The Strange Theories. When official answers fall short, people fill the gaps with their own. And in this case, theories, some chilling, some bizarre, have multiplied like shadows at sunset. One camp believes the crime was the work of an organized group, perhaps a cult or secret society, its ritualistic elements pointing to something beyond ordinary violence. To them, the missing clues weren't accidents but deliberate erasures, a cover-up carried out with precision. Others lean toward the lone wolf explanation, suggesting a meticulous individual who thrived on confusion. They argue that the very absence of clarity was intentional, designed to mock investigators and keep the story alive long after the act itself. Then there are the theories that wander into the fringe. Government conspiracies, hidden experiments, even whispers of the paranormal. Were the strange coincidences simply that coincidences, or were they hints that something larger was at play? These theories often say more about our need for meaning than about the case itself. Humans hate a vacuum. We'd rather invent elaborate explanations than sit with uncertainty. But in doing so, we sometimes blur the line between possibility and fantasy. And yet, every so often, a wild theory holds a sliver of truth. Could one of these strange ideas actually be the missing piece? Or are they just distractions keeping us from seeing what's been in front of us all along? Chapter 24, What We'll Never Know. Some mysteries are solved, some are explained, and some are destined to remain forever out of reach. For this case, the list of unknowns is staggering. Who was truly responsible? What were their motives? How did so many pieces fall into place, only to vanish before the investigators could assemble them? We may never know. The files, the witnesses, the evidence, they all tell fragments of a story. But fragments aren't the same as clarity. And sometimes, no matter how many minds devote themselves to solving a puzzle, the answers remain just beyond grasp. Families live with the gaps, filling them with memories, rumors, and questions that can never fully be answered. Investigators carry them like invisible scars, the frustration never entirely fading. Even the public, captivated by every twist, understands in some quiet way that the truth may be forever elusive. And yet, that is also the haunting beauty of the case. Its elusiveness forces us to confront uncertainty, to ask difficult questions, and to realize that not every story has an ending neatly packaged in resolution. Some mysteries persist not because they are unsolvable, but because they are reminders of human frailty, of complexity, and of the delicate line between truth and perception. In the end, the case remains a shadow, and some truths we will never know. Chapter 25, The Lasting Impact. Even without resolution, this case has left an indelible mark on the families, the investigators, and the public imagination. Its influence stretches far beyond the original scene, touching every corner of the story that followed. For families, the impact is deeply personal. Their lives were forever altered by the uncertainty, grief, and the endless questions. Even decades later, they carry a weight most people can scarcely imagine, the weight of a truth that was promised but never delivered. For law enforcement, the case became a benchmark for frustration and reflection. It showed the limits of technology, procedure, and human intuition. It became a reminder that even the most skilled investigators are sometimes powerless against chaos carefully orchestrated or reality stubbornly refusing to reveal itself. For society at large, the story persists as a cultural touchstone, a reminder of the fragility of certainty. It's a case that sparks conversation, speculation, and obsession,